Chapter 10. Sweat trickled down Victor's back as he made his way through the labyrinth that was the Des Moines Police Department. He reached for the elevator's button and felt drops fall from the offending limb's armpit. A ding sounded, and he stepped into the elevator. After the door slid shut, he lifted an arm and inhaled through his nose. "At least I don't stink," he muttered. The elevator came to a stop and dinged again before the doors opened. His tongue found the opening on his disposable coffee cup, and he sipped from it as he filtered through the bullpen. His eyebrows lifted in response to the morning greetings from the few detectives that were seated at their desk. The smell of their cheap office coffee threatened to infiltrate his $5 Arabica aura. "Jesus Christ, I can't believe you guys drink that stuff," he commented. His attaché found its place next to his desk, and he took another sip of what the baristas called a black eye. Silence followed the comment where repartee had been expected. He thought nothing of it and began to get ready for the day. At the desk across from him, Henry Bartlett sat hunched too close to his monitor. His attention briefly skipped to Victor, and he shot a forced smile. "Good morning," he mumbled. "Good morning, Henry," Victor responded. He motioned to Henry's mug. Evidence of a tea bag dangled over the words, "Number 1 Dad." "What kind of tea do you have there?" he asked. Henry's focus briefly diverted to his mug, and he grabbed the handle. "Nothing special. Black tea." He drank from the mug and returned his attention to his monitor. "That's got to be better than whatever can they scraped the office coffee out of," Victor jested. "It's probably of equal quality. I got the tea bag from a box in the back of a cupboard in the break room a few months ago. I grabbed a handful of them and threw them in a desk drawer." Victor chuckled. "Why do that to yourself?" Henry looked at Victor through thick prescription lenses. "What?" he asked. "Start your day off right, man." Victor lifted up his disposable coffee cup and sipped it with enthusiasm. "I have 3 kids and a wife with an Amazon credit card." Henry's tone was flat, without even a hint of levity. Victor's desk phone rang, and he gratefully grabbed for it. "This is Detective Victor Cross," he recited. "Hey, Victor, you're needed in the conference room on 3. Did you say 3? The 3rd floor?" Victor asked. "Yeah, don't keep us waiting." The phone clicked. Victor put the phone down. He stared at it as he ran through possible reasons why his sergeant wanted to meet with him on a different floor than their own. "Us?" he asked himself. "What?" Henry asked. "Franco just called me into a meeting on the 3rd floor." Henry swiveled a bit on his chair toward Victor, giving him his full attention. "Are you moving to homicide?" he asked. It would be news to me if I am," Victor replied. "Could you put in a good word for me?" Henry asked. Victor stood up and tucked in his chair. "Sure." He finished his coffee and tossed the disposable cup in their shared trash can. Heat continued to radiate from Victor's core as he made his way to the 3rd floor. It had begun before getting out of bed. His sheets had been soaked. After a cold shower, he had been somewhat relieved, but his morning workout routine had reignited the fire within him, and the black eye concoction from his favorite barista had been like tossing gasoline-soaked logs on the flames. He ducked into the 3rd floor men's bathroom and grabbed some paper towels from the dispenser. He patted his shiny forehead and cheekbones. A thumb pushed a button, and the teeth of a small comb flipped outward. He quickly brushed thick beard hairs into place and folded the comb before putting it back in his pocket. A thumb and forefinger pinched a bit of the wiry dark hair, and he attempted to bury a small patch of grey. He glanced at his eyes, and worry knotted his gut. "Fuck," he whispered. They were noticeably bloodshot. He pulled out an eyedropper from his pocket and dosed each eye twice before repeatedly blinking and wiping his eyes with a fistful of paper towels. The sudden urge to urinate hit him, and he thanked God he had made the pit stop. He swung over to the urinal and relieved himself. The golden stream was concerningly dark, and he looked away once he noticed it. He washed his hands and inhaled deeply as he looked to his eyes again. They were noticeably better, but still looked as if he had a sleep deficit. It's fine," he muttered. He pushed open the bathroom door with an elbow and headed toward the conference room. His heart pounded within its bone cage, and he felt the cool air of the third floor against his still sweating face as he turned a corner and zeroed in on his destination. Faces glanced in his direction as he passed the conference room's internal windows. He reached for the door's handle, and then stopped when he saw Sergeant Franco racing to meet him in the hall. "About time," Sergeant Franco muttered. He let the heavy conference room door slam shut behind him. "What the fuck is going on?" Victor asked. "I'm not going to homicide, Silvio. There were 10 homicides last year. They have more downtime than fucking firefighters, and I'm not going to spend 90% of my time scrolling Instagram or whatever." "Hey, calm down, Cross. And it's Sergeant Franco outside of my office." "Give them Henry. He wants—" "Christ, Victor. Slow down. You'll beat red." Victor clenched his jaw. "You're giving a piss sample before the end of the day." Victor glared at him. "Don't look at me like that. You're the one coming in every day on a knife's edge with bloodshot eyes." "It's unbelievably insulting," Victor growled. Silvio glanced into the conference room at the 2 men seated at the table. "Homicide wants to talk to you about your uncle. Right now, they're calling it a formal interview. Don't give them a reason to rename it." Victor's thoughts tripped over themselves, and he deflated. "What?" he asked. "Cassius is tied to a homicide scene. Homicide wants to know what you know." "A homicide?" "Yeah. Is there anything I should know?" Victor felt the radiator within his core bump up a few notches, and he shifted his stance. Heat seeped up from below the collar of his shirt into his beard and over his face. He looked in at the 2 homicide detectives. "No, I don't know what the fuck is going on," he admitted. "Okay, I believe you. But I gotta tell you, you're reading like a whore in church. You need to calm the fuck down and quick. Be truthful and honest. You know what it's all about." Silvio opened the conference room door and led the way. "Hey, Victor. Good to see you." The younger of the 2 homicide detectives halfway stood and leaned toward Victor with an arm outstretched. Victor unsuccessfully attempted to match a name with the face as he met the outstretched hand with one of his own. "Morning," he responded. His forced smile and attention shifted to the detective that was a decade closer to his age. He responded with a nod. "Have a seat. This shouldn't take long," the younger homicide detective said. Victor followed the advice and sat next to Silvio. "You go to the gym before you get in, right?" the older homicide detective asked. Victor looked to Silvio for a moment before responding. He felt a bead of sweat crawl down his back. Yeah, he responded. "Yeah, I've seen you on the bench. Mark, this guy is a beast." The younger homicide detective looked up from his laptop. "Oh yeah?" Victor forced an uncomfortable laugh. "He does 3 plates like it's nothing," the older homicide detective insisted. "Nah, it's definitely something," Victor assured the chuckling group. "I don't speak gym, bro. How much weight is that?" Silvio asked. 315, Mark responded. His attention splintered from his laptop for a second. "I can't do more than 1, he mumbled. Victor shifted in his seat and put his elbows on the table before leaning forward toward the two homicide detectives. "I'm sure you could do two with some encouragement," he said. Mark's eyes met Victor's, and he smirked. "I appreciate the confidence." "You should come in with me, early morning sometime," Victor offered. "I'll get you over the finish line." Mark turned the laptop toward Victor and Silvio. "I look forward to being mogged by you, Victor." Victor and Mark chuckled while the older homicide detective and Silvio exchanged glances. "Any idea what they're talking about?" Silvio asked. The older homicide detective shook his head. "I'm too old." "Okay, down to business," Mark announced. "On Saturday evening, we were notified of a homicide at Great Plains Medical Center in one of their inpatient rooms." Mark clicked on one of the icons at the bottom of his laptop, and the driver's license of a man who looked to be in his mid-50s to mid-60s pulled up. Nicholas Rowan was admitted for a minor cardiac event and moved to an inpatient room for overnight observation. "Does he look familiar, Victor?" the older homicide detective asked. A chord of recognition was struck within Victor, but it was vague enough to keep him from bringing it up. "I don't think so," he admitted. Mark and the older homicide detective exchanged glances before Mark clicked another icon, and the image of a bloody hospital gown clinging to the body of the man popped up. He was stabbed once in the chest. The weapon wasn't recovered. Victor stared into Mark's unflinching gaze. "I imagine that's an issue for you guys," he offered. Nurses were alerted to a code blue. Assistance was rushed to his room, and he was found like this. Mark explained. "Forgive me, guys. I don't know what this has to do with me or my uncle," Victor responded. Both homicide detectives looked at Silvio. "Yeah, I gave him a heads up," Silvio admitted. "Bite me." "We pulled surveillance footage and found this," Mark said. A video began playing. A man exited a hospital hallway into a patient's room. Several seconds passed. A rushed crowd of medical personnel entered the room with a cart. Mark clicked his mouse, and the footage stopped. He rewound the clip and stopped it just as the man was opening the door to the patient's room. He zoomed in on the man's face. The blurred cluster of pixels clarified. Victor leaned in. It was Cassius. His heart thudded in his chest. "We tracked him back to parking lot surveillance," Mark continued. His mouse clicked again. Cassius's car could be seen pulling into the parking lot. "We ran his plates, and the vehicle belongs to Cassius Cross. Your uncle, it seems." Victor pulled back and began to sit back in his seat, but stopped when he felt his wet shirt. "Did the doctors and nurses find him in the victim's room?" he asked. Mark and the older homicide detective exchanged glances again. "No," Mark responded. "And there was no footage of him leaving the room the way he came in. His vehicle is still where he parked it." "He did a Houdini," the older homicide detective said. "The hospital windows are sealed, and the ventilation ducts wouldn't have been an option." One of Victor's hands went to his beard, and he scratched it as he stared at the laptop screen. "I can't believe he'd do something like this," he admitted. Mark's mouse clicked again, and the driver's license of the victim came back on the screen. "Are you sure you don't recognize this man?" he asked. "Nicholas Rowan," he reiterated. "He looks vaguely familiar, but I can't place him," Victor admitted. Mark and the older homicide detective exchanged glances again. "He works at St. Julian's Catholic School and Briarwood University. Custodial staff for both." "I went to St. Julian's," Victor volunteered. "Rowan started working there in '06, and you graduated in '05, Mark said. Victor's eyebrows raised in surprise. Maybe you saw him around the Briarwood campus. That's where your youngest brother goes to college, right? Mark asked. He just graduated last week, Victor clarified. So, Michael, that's your youngest brother, right? Mark asked. Yeah. So, Michael went to St. Julian's beginning in '09, joining your other brother who began going there in '04, and you graduated high school from there in '05, is that right? Yeah, I guess, Victor shrugged. What does this have to do with this guy's murder? Mark's eyes crawled over Victor. Are you feeling okay? You're sweating. Victor's eyes widened in disbelief. I'm fine. He clenched his jaw to keep from continuing. He runs hot, the older homicide detective interjected. He's always drenched at the gym. Victor blinked and felt a bit of embarrassment collide with relief. The connection is interesting, Mark explained. Rowan shows up in Des Moines in late '04, gets a job at St. Julian's a year later. You weren't there anymore, but your brothers both went there for 13 years, while Rowan was a custodian. Maybe that's why he looks vaguely familiar, Victor. Maybe you saw him at one of their school events, if not at Briarwood, where one of his duties was keeping the natatorium clean. That's where they hold the swimming events. Michael is a competitive swimmer, right? Yeah. What are you suggesting? Victor asked. Mark shook his head and shrugged. I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just laying out what we've found. How is any of this relevant? Victor asked. Rowan moved from Portland in late '04, Mark said. His stare bore into Victor's eyes. Okay. Victor looked to the older homicide detective and then back to Mark. Is that supposed to mean something to me? You have another uncle, Anthony, who lives or lived in Portland, right? Mark asked. Victor broke eye contact. Yeah, we haven't heard from him since before my mom died and my dad disappeared. I presume you know your mother's death is an unsolved homicide? Mark asked. She died while giving birth to Michael at home, Victor asserted. Yes, but the medical examiner deemed it death by asphyxiation. Your father was and is still the prime suspect. Silvio put a hand on Victor's shoulder. Calm down. They're just doing their job, he whispered. He just disappeared. Your father, I mean. No sign or trace of him, Mark said. Another Houdini, the older homicide detective interjected. Your other uncle, Anthony Cross, lived with Nicholas Rowan in Portland, Victor. Did they ever come for a visit, or vice versa? He asked. Recognition finally clicked in Victor's mind. I remember him now, he said. Maybe once or twice they came for a visit when I was a teenager. I never spent much time with them. I think my dad was uncomfortable about. He trailed off. And you haven't seen or heard from your Uncle Anthony in how long? Mark asked. Since before my mum died, Victor reiterated. Maybe '03? We've been looking for Anthony since we came across these connections. Guess what? Mark asked. Another Houdini, the older homicide detective answered. His job was abandoned in '04, and as far as we can tell, he just inexplicably disappeared. You know, like your father and apparently Cassius, Mark said. You can imagine why we're so interested in the case. The older homicide detective interjected. Yeah, Victor admitted. He attempted to piece all of the information together in his mind. So, let's start from the beginning. Mark reclaimed the small group's attention. Sometime in '04, Anthony Cross vanishes. Melinda Cross dies in late '04. Maximus Cross vanishes at the same time. Nicholas Rowan, Anthony Cross's romantic partner, moves to Anthony's hometown without him. He gets a job at the school where Anthony's nephews go. He eventually gets a second job at the university where one of the nephews ends up going. Finally, Rowan is murdered after Cassius Cross enters his hospital room, and like both of his brothers before him, Cassius vanishes. The three other men looked to Victor. His attention leapt from one man to another before landing back on Mark. I don't know what the fuck to say, Mark. Most of this is news to me. If Cass did kill him for whatever reason, I had no idea he was going to, and I haven't seen him since Saturday late afternoon. Where and when did you see him? Mark asked. Alexander and I were getting back from the grocery store. We went shopping for Michael's graduation party. Cassius was leaving while we were pulling into the driveway. I'm not sure of the exact time, around 5 p.m. Did he tell you where he was going? Mark asked. He said he forgot something at the office. It sounded like he'd be right back, but I didn't see him the rest of the night. I figured he got caught up with something at work. Did you notice anything unusual about him or his demeanor? Victor recalled the bright flashing light in the cabin of Cassius's car and dismissed it again without a second thought. He was rushing, he concluded. Anything else? No, we only interacted for a few seconds. Both of us were in our cars. And you haven't seen or heard from him since then? Mark asked. No, Victor reasserted. Have either of your brothers ever mentioned Nicholas Rowan? The older homicide detective asked. No, Victor replied. We'd like to speak with both Alexander and Michael today, if you can manage it, Mark said. Yeah, I'll ask. Mark looked to the older homicide detective. Want to cover anything else? He asked. No, I think we're done here. A smile formed on the older homicide detective's face, and he reached across the table with an open hand toward Victor. We're going to have to work out together soon. I need all the help I can get, he joked. Victor shook his hand and smiled. Sure, he replied.